Hello.
Hello, seems I cannot hear you, but I can hear beeping. Still no sound?
Hi, Shui. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thanks. Um, I was playing with setting up my headphone, which messed up my local system. So I'm just going to wear the headphone now. Cool. Let me share my screen.
Hi, Susan.
Good afternoon, Louise.
Hello, good morning, Susan and Shiwei and Feynman, Bin, everyone else.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And I also just want to bring out the participant list to make sure everyone is admitted from the lobby. Okay, cool. So quickly going through our PR today. We don't have that many in the queue. Akash, you are still working with Binbin on reviewing dev Helm files. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's ready to go. I'm just looking for another acknowledge on the PR. So Bin, whenever you get a chance, I think it's basically ready.
Yeah, I'll take it over today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Akash. Thanks, Binbin. And we had a little bit of discussion about bumping the Gatekeeper 3.13 and the cache issue that we're seeing. Yeah, Akash, do you have an update?
Yeah, so I think I can talk a little bit about it here because I don't think we had everyone in the conversation on Monday. So basically, Gatekeeper released 3.13 a couple weeks ago. So I looked into upgrading our test matrix to support 3.12 and 3.13, and that's when we found that some of our tests were failing. Turns out that's because in 3.13, Gatekeeper introduced an external data response cache, and this cache is responsible for basically caching the whatever Ratify returns back, so it's verification reports. And this is helpful for reducing request load on the external data provider. So it's for the most part it's a good improvement. Unfortunately, there's a few issues that we've run into. So the first one is that the TTL for the cache is quite long. It's about 3 minutes. And so we have some test cases where we want to apply a certain configuration and then we expect it to fail and then we apply the same image and then expect it to pass. But because of the longer TTL from Gatekeeper side, that second request doesn't actually come to Ratify. So it would be nice for testing cases to either turn off the cache or to be able to configure that TTL. And so I think Susan followed up on that, and they have an issue tracking it and a PR out that will actually add it for the 3.14 release. In the meantime, I spoke to the maintainers, and they recommended to manually patch the gatekeeper deployment to add that new overridden TTL flag. So the PR I have out now actually does that. It just patches the gatekeeper deployment if we're testing using 3.13. And I believe it should, I think it passes all of the checks now. So as far as other concerns, one is how many gatekeeper versions do we want to support? Do we want to support 3.11 as well? Right now we only support N-1, but I think there might be a case for supporting 3.11 because other tooling still relies on it. So we could expand the matrix to support 3 versions of gatekeeper here. The other part has to do with one scenario in the admission case where, because we have such a long TTL of 3 minutes, if Ratify returns some sort of verification error, so let's say during the notation signature verification process, it's unable to pull the signature for some transient reason from registry, that doesn't actually qualify as a system error on Ratify. That qualifies just as a verification error. So we don't return an error back to Gatekeeper. We just return the full verify report, which has the error in it. And that's a problem because they don't treat that as an error. They treat that as a valid response. And so that error response with the verify report is then cached for 3 minutes, which means that any resources created during the 3 minutes are going to run into the same issue. So ideally, if you're for admission, I think we should probably keep it shorter, maybe like align it with our current HTTP server cache, which is 10 seconds. So at least we can help with some of the burstiness that goes on when you apply like a large workload resource. But 3 minutes, I feel, is quite long for admission scenarios. Yeah, any questions there?
No, I have a couple thoughts though. I think I discussed this with you earlier, Cash. One, I think we should align with Kubernetes and potentially other OSS offerings around the support version. So believe N-2 is a standard in some of these services. So think supporting 3.11, 3.12, and 3.13 makes sense. So that's one. The second is if we wanna build this Frankensteinish version of Gatekeeper that would contain the flag to shorten down the TTL while they produce version 3.14. How would we like adjust that in our tests so that basically only like do we have to basically like install 2 versions of Gatekeeper, or we'll all be running against the Frankenstein version? What are some of your thoughts here?
Yeah, so what I was thinking was so the matrix means that every single combination or configuration of Kubernetes versus Gatekeeper spawns a new full test suite. So for the 3.13 specific test suite, we can conditionally add this patched version of Gatekeeper only for that. So this doesn't affect 3.11 or 3.12 test scenarios.
I see.
And in terms of how it's done, it's actually so you install Gatekeeper regularly using Helm install, and then you do a kubectl patch on the deployment resource. So when you patch the deployment resource, it basically recycles the pods and applies the new configuration on a new set of pods.
I see. The other thing is that we should get at least a ballpark estimate of when they're planning on getting 3.14. And the reason I ask this is because like if they patch or if they do anything on their like the 3.13 release, we would need to basically be keeping on top of this in order to and rebuilding and creating like a new version of this Frankenstein build. So I don't know if that's like how long can we actually like bear that overhead?
Yeah, Susan, I think there was that
Oh,
issue that you had posted, right?
there you go. So is October 31st?
Yeah, that is the current due date. So that's in 2 months.
I see. Okay, so it's not too bad.
I think the concern, at least my concern, is that for testing, it's probably okay. We can alter our pipelines for now, and then once it's released, we can decide how we want to handle it. But getting clarity on how we want to handle TTL in these error cases for admission scenario, I think we should discuss that and figure out what the best way forward for that is, because that's going to actually affect like the user experience. So.
Right.
Should we start maybe a discussion thread on the gatekeeper repository?
Sure. If you scroll down, Susan, on this one, I've actually been commenting, going back and forth with the pull request that's connected to this issue.
Is it
No.
this one?
No, the one below that. If you scroll, yeah, this one. Yep. Yep. So if you just scroll down. So basically, the summary of this discussion is I was trying to understand where they got 3 minutes from. Turns out 3 minutes has nothing to do with the audit interval, because they're like, if we can't align with the audit interval, because there's no guarantee that mid-cycle that 3 minutes won't expire or whatever that is, which makes sense. So this is some number that they've arbitrarily set for now. So maybe we could discuss with them and they'll agree to lower it to a value. And the other part was separating the audit interval TTL, the audit cache TTL versus the admission webhook cache TTL. Currently, they have them linked together, and I think they should be separated because, again, admission should be a lot lower.
Okay. Yep. Did they understand our scenario where like we won't explicitly like surface an error here, but more of it will be a valid response, but that contains an error that we don't want to be cached for 3 minutes?
No, I haven't actually explained that part yet.
Okay.
I can follow up on this thread unless we want to create an actual discussion.
I think following up here it makes sense. There's good conversation and context here. Susan, can you paste the thread in the message?
Yep. Yeah, they also have a design doc for the feature. I'll try to find that and post it in the notes as well.
Makes sense.
Cool. So I'm just trying to think of the timeline. So for RC8, so Akash, we've validated that we are compatible with Gatekeeper 3.13. Do we have to, like, is this change, the PR that you have, do we have to merge this before RC8?
I think we should, because otherwise our tests will get blocked.
And this is
Okay, and the change is almost ready, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get to reviewing it today because I believe like you'll be off tomorrow.
Yes, I'll be
tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I guess you'll take this out of draft and then we can review it today.
Sure. I think Luis, you were going to say something.
No, go. That's it.
Next PR is 1041, update documentation about install Ratify on Azure policy enabled AKS cluster. That one is Xinghe's.
Yeah, this one is mostly about if the AKS has enabled the Azure policy add-on, there will be some steps difference between directly install the Ratify or open source version Ratify so I make some update on the exist document.
Thank you. Yeah, we have to collect more usage, but I almost think that ratify search rotation should be on by default. Like in all the tests, we've been enabling it. But I wonder, like, once we ship, like, can we actually get telemetry? Do people turn this feature on? How does telemetry work for Ratify?
We don't have any metrics that actually tell us like what the configuration of the class of Ratify is installed.
Yeah,
It's purely like action-based metrics, so like request duration, how many requests out, AKV stuff, things like that.
Yeah, I think there is a good point here to see if we want to have a item to basically get telemetry around certain configurations, just to get data points for improving the next set of releases. How do we have what telemetry framework do we use for other data points?
We use OpenTelemetry with Prometheus.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So then I think let's discuss more maybe on Monday, Susan. Because I think there is a point here to be made about which settings are the most common to surface out or to like are used by customers. Does that make sense?
Sure. So this is a documentation change. So it's not, it doesn't impact RC8, but I think we'll get that reviewed.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
And next one is also in draft 1044. So we were having a discussion, I think, on Tuesday about Ratify traffic, and we're all curious like what versions they're using, and then we realized that it wasn't really broken down into versions. So Bin, thank you for taking this PR. Is it still work in progress, or do you think it's going to be ready soon?
Yeah, I'm adding some tests to CPR, but and for CPR, I'm just following how Gatekeeper does to the version, because I know the notation and the ORAS we will set up some version and some build metadata, but for Gatekeeper they use a different way, so I'm just following the way they're using.
That's great. So it's not static, right? Which file does it read the version from?
If you go to the publish package YAML file, the first one. Yeah, so on line 47.
The tag?
Yeah. So basically we push once we push a tag, so it will get the latest tag, and then it will be passed to our Docker build command by setting up the version.
Oh, okay, great. So everything is like automated. We don't really have to update any string anywhere every release.
Yes. I tested manually to like passing v1 to this like version tag, and it works. So I guess it should also work when we do a publish.
Yeah, so we'll be able to validate it with RC8 that if it actually, we should validate that, for example, on the ACR logs, would we see the right user agent information?
Yes.
Yep, we'll take a note on that validation. as a post-release activity this time. Thank you for that. Yeah, before we move to the presentation or discussion, any other items PR related? Cool. The first agenda item, yeah, Akash, thank you for creating this issue. I see you have had listed several questions, and I thought like maybe we should discuss this before we release GA. Do you want to give an overview of the issue?
Sure, yeah. So basically the gist of it is that currently we don't have a good formula or reasoning for which versions of Kubernetes we support and what is our kind of end of life determination of like when do we bump to the next versions of Kubernetes. We just kind of bump AKS ones according to whenever AKS stops supporting the old one. That's how we bumped from 1.24 and 1.25 to 1.25 and 1.26. And our the open source Kubernetes support is also pretty ad hoc in when we actually bump that matrix. And then apart from that, when we build our CRD image, we've kind of pinned it to 1.25, and I think it's been on 1.25 since the beginning. So we should have some discussion on which version are we going to pin it to, and are we going to build for multiple Kubernetes versions? And if we do build for multiple, how do we publish multiple, and how do we tag those, and what would be the schema for that?
I think that one thing that we need to consider there is that Kubernetes is now actually not. I was alluding to AKS, but no, it's never mind. Is there like a version of Kubernetes that are long-term servicing? Well, I guess that's a community funded thing, right?
I think there's a working group for LTS support going on now, but there's no actual adopted proposal yet, apart from AKS specifically doing LTS. So.
I see. Interesting.
I feel like our goal is to support whichever version that there's a lot of usage on, right? Like being the overall goal. And just a question, like if most of our or a lot of our customers are on AKS, does AKS adopt the latest as soon as it comes out?
Near as soon as it comes out. They have their own way that they ingest it. They do some special things in the background before they're able to publish it and make it available to everyone. And it starts in preview and then it goes to GA. Every version does. But I think their goal is to be compatible with the recent version within maybe a month or two. So they're pretty up to date with support.
I mean, I think that's a good question, Susan. Do we have telemetry to know which versions are running? I think we just had the same conversation with Gatekeeper as well, right? So I think maybe that's a better strategy to, based on the logs or the data, if we're able to assess where most of our users are, and then after it reaches a certain lower hand threshold, we said, okay, if less than, I don't know, 5% of the users are on this version, then maybe it's time to stop supporting that. Or, I don't know, like, but first, like, do we have a way to gather that data? Maybe we put it as a work item to track that.
So does Gatekeeper have any documentation around this? Like what's the practice they're following?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they do. I haven't looked yet.
Feynman just posted a link. ISTO has a Kubernetes support matrix. So I'm just going to open this link.
I have a question. So do we include a test series or test metrics for Kubernetes in our E2E end-to-end test? So which versions we will test, we usually test in our end-to-end test cases?
Yeah, sure. So the workflow that runs on a PR can be found in the workflow directory, Feynman. So this a build pr.yaml file contains the test cases that we run per PR for each iteration. So there is a defined matrix. For example, on line 73, currently we've been following like the current version and the last version. So this is our matrix for Gatekeeper and Kubernetes. Does that answer your question, Feynman?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, I think that works now that we don't have that many customers, but I do feel like we do need to base our support on data. So, I mean, yeah, I think that we should at least make some work. Let's revisit like what data points we want to have before we release stable, the first version of stable. I think these gatekeeper versions, potentially like configurations, like I think we do need a major sort of telemetry add that where we can actually get some metrics in and do some product decisions later on.
Yeah, just to clarify, Luis, I think there's no mechanism to get any telemetry today, right? Because the customer installs Ratify on their own cluster. We actually have no idea what configuration they're using. Is that the right understanding?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, I don't know, just to the crowd. Like, okay, if you have information on how we can get telemetry, like maybe I can start an issue, like how do we get telemetry for Ratify install? But in general, like for example, Shuwei, how would you know which environment Aura's client is installed on, for example?
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I guess Aura's is not like okay, does Aura's have feature flag? Like once the customer downloads Aura's, how do you get telemetry on which feature they have enabled, for example?
No, we don't have that. We only have server log.
Yeah, so it'll be nice to know what they use, but we don't have a mechanism for that today. Yeah, but back to this support table, Feynman, I do think we should have something like this for Ratify as well. Go ahead, Feynman.
Yeah, regarding the telemetry question raised by Susan, my understanding is that if we want to donate the project to an open source foundation like CNCF, so adding telemetry to the open source project is an uncompliant action. So we are not allowed to do that for an open source project, but it is allowed to gather some metrics from the server side. I think we can focus on how many users using the Kubernetes, which Kubernetes versions in AKS or the Kubernetes distribution. I mean, we can gather the metrics from the server side, but adding telemetry to the client side or to the open source projects are generally not allowed in the community, since it has some privacy risk.
Yeah, totally with you there. Yes, even our intention is to like provide better service, but it's not allowed.
Yeah, that's the case. And at least in CNCF Notary project, and also ORAS, we don't have the very detailed, we don't have telemetry to gather detailed metrics from customer or from users' consumption.
Yeah, thanks for that note. Cool. So for the
Yeah, then let's align also a plan to, let's align with Gatekeeper and with like data about KH distribution telemetry that's out there. Just general usage telemetry. I'm sure that's something that we can find out as well.
yeah, and just to be like cloud agnostic, we can also see the AWS Kubernetes service, like what are the, like, are they also following similar patterns as Azure? Yeah, just as a goodwill.
Yep.
I think aligned with the Gatekeeper Kubernetes support strategy is a good idea, since we need to, Gatekeeper is a dependency for Ratify. We need to use Gatekeeper in advance.
Yep. Oh, and Akash, you're back, right?
Yeah, he
Yes.
thumbs up.
Yeah.
Thanks. And just to note on the CRD, so our CRD uses the Kubernetes version mostly for the kubectl command. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right, because it's not actually building anything, it's applying CRDs. Yeah, it's for the kubectl command.
Yeah. So like theoretically, of course, if they go through some major breaking kubectl changes, like let's say a version that's built by like version 18 won't work on version 19. But I think in reality, that's not likely to happen.
Yeah, that's true. I think the only concern is that my past experience, if your kubectl version is 2 or 3 versions off from the cluster version, it sends like a warning, or I don't know if it blocks it, but it definitely tells you that, hey, it's very incompatible. So
Yep. So we should, I think that the summary would be that we should be constantly updating the Kubernetes version that's building the CRD.
Yep.
So as we are updating our matrix, we also need to update the Docker file for building the CRDs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Susan, since you're mentioning CRDs, are the CRDs already still in beta 1?
Yes.
And we have policy CRD in alpha.
Yeah, alpha. Our youngest one.
Maybe we should pair up a discussion around what we want to do for our stable release. Is it
and align ourselves to Gatekeeper maybe.
Yes, because the thing, I don't know like how the community takes if we have like a ratified version that's called a stable version using still a beta version of the CRDs and an alpha version of and the policy uses alpha. So we should probably have a conversation on that as well. Maybe for them.
I can create an issue and put it in the RC 8 milestone just so we're tracking it.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a good point. Cool. Next item is the readiness probe. Let me just clean up my tabs quickly. Close other tabs. Okay. So this one came up in a discussion yesterday that the customer would benefit from a readiness probe. So just checking with Akash if you had some initial ideas on how we would implement the readiness probe, like what would use an endpoint? Do we need a new API to say we're ready? Can we use an existing endpoint?
Yeah, I was gonna look at how Gatekeeper does it. My understanding is that when you use a readiness probe, specifically in cases when you're doing like an upgrade. So deployments of workload resources, use that readiness probe to determine if they're gonna, or whether the service is gonna route traffic to those pods. The liveness probe, that's for the case where if your container is still alive. So you periodically, I think it's the API server will reach out to that endpoint to see if it's getting 200 responses back. So we basically have to set up some sort of, I think we have to set up some sort of mini server or something that comes online as soon as our actual server comes online, so that it'll return like a 200 response when it's probed. I don't know what there's probably some convention on how you're supposed to do it. Gatekeeper is probably a good example to follow.
Akash, for the requests that are getting, are we dropping the requests that are serviced by pods that are not ready, or are they retried?
They're dropped. They get routed to the unavailable instance, and they come back as service unavailable.
Okay. Yeah, this
And
is probably...
similar scenario yesterday that discussed was like let's say the customer deleted some CRs, like policy. So then maybe we have a check somewhere that says, oh, if you're trying to create the executor without a policy, that's not allowed. And then it goes into like Ratify panic mode.
Why don't we have any retry logic for this case?
For the CR?
For when
that got deleted?
For when or for a request that gets sent to a probe that's to a pod that's not available. Like where return the pod is returning 5 something, right?
Like not available.
Right.
Do you think
Yeah.
Gatekeeper have retry logic or?
Sorry. I mean, in fact, in my yesterday scenario, the Ratify itself has some logic to trying to restart. But if we have a readiness probe, the pod status will not become running. The difference is that the pod status will become running before the server is up. So if we do not have readiness probe, sometimes the pod will show running, but in fact it is the server is not up.
Right, I think I understand that, but the thing is that if let's say a pod services a request and it's not ready, but it's shown as ready, it will return a 520 something, right? Like a server error, correct? Akash?
Yeah, because the actual the server is just not found almost from the client point of view.
I see.
So the retry would have to be on the client end, which would be a gatekeeper functionality. Yeah. Because on the server side, we are not ready to even accept anything. We won't know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we don't know if Gatekeeper is retrying. I want to understand if this is an absolutely must for stable before we ship.
I don't believe they retry, but I think we need to double check on it.
Okay. Yeah.
It'll give a more polished experience so that we don't say, oh, we are ready, but we're actually crashing.
Yeah, and Gatekeeper also has both liveness and readiness probes that they use. Because
how we can triage everything in the RC8 milestone. So I'll put it in to RC8, and then immediately we'll go look at the list and prioritize to move things out.
Yeah, I wanna make sure that I mean, it does look like something. I mean, if in fact Gatekeeper is not retrying or like these are completely dropped, does look like we need to do this before V1. And also, I kind of want to understand a little bit more kind of how much work is this to create these liveliness probes. So yeah, let's triage.
Yeah, so from the sound of Akash, we'll need a new endpoint, right?
And
Yeah,
sure.
we need like an endpoint. Yep.
Yeah. So
it's basically a service that's kind of pinging each pod, right?
So this is from our point of view, we're the server. So we need to implement two endpoints that basically once the server started, it can return 200 immediately. The pinging is done actually by the internal Kubernetes API server. You just in the deployment spec, you specify, hey, I've got a liveness probe at this API endpoint, and I've got a readiness probe at this API endpoint. Yep.
Got it.
Okay. So looking at all our RC8 issues, so just to clarify, like our target release date for RC8 is next Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for like bug fixes and essential items. And we don't really plan to work on any feature or bug fixes for 1.0, right? 1.0 is currently scheduled for 15th, so it's 1 week immediately after RC8. So we shouldn't plan anything for that week.
I mean, the idea was to be code complete this last release, so that we could basically focus just on any feedback or bug fixes. Now, there might have been some influence from some cloud providers to kind of ship around certain dates. We can probably revisit if we have more time for V1.
Okay, so if we don't finish everything in RCA, it can spill over a little bit
yes,
to V1.
I think we will have a little bit more time than just 2 weeks.
1 week. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, we need to have some offline conversations.
Yeah. Okay. So given RC8 is next week, I think our goal should be like making sure everything, like the milestone should be clean and everything have a owner.
Mm-hmm.
And we should move everything that does not fit in this milestone out.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So missing Ratify version. So Binbin, you already started working on this, right?
Yes. The previous PR was just fixing things.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. So set one, refresh, improve ratified TSG. Do we have any concrete items here, Binbin?
Actually not. I think it's more like a long-term issue. So it's just checking like if we have any like TSG we can update. So it works. Yeah.
So yesterday Akash brought up a good point that yesterday Josh pinged Akash about like an error that he was seeing with using the PKCS format. So I said I will add it to this TSG, which I will start as TSG for cert provider. So can I assign it to myself to track that work, Binbin? Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
where do our TSGs live?
They don't exist yet.
Got it. So maybe that's the work item here, right?
Yeah.
Create initial TSGs.
Yep, exactly. And I'll use the cert provider as the first one that goes in. Yeah. Okay, back to the board. Update test matrix. Akash, you're wrapping that up today. Great. Search rotator might update CA bundle with the wrong value. How are you going with this one, Binbin?
I'll take a look once I finish the user agent title.
Yeah. Do you think this one is of high priority? Is this something the customer would actually run into?
Because it's an intermittent error, so I just try to fix this, but I can't reproduce it like very like 100%. It's only like 10% of possibility to get this error, and also we can only reproduce it when we do in one specific case. If you click into the issue, I remember I specify the specific case that we might run into this issue. So yeah, I feel we should fix it before V1. Otherwise, especially on Azure service, if customers see this issue, it will be some issue to us.
Yep, sounds good. 982, it's testing related, so there's no, we'll have to fix whatever bug that comes out of this negative testing.
Yeah, actually, yeah, Susan, I have prepared a doc for negative test. Maybe you can click on this issue and open a link under this one. Yeah, this is actually the summarization for negative test cases that I want to invite our Ratify maintainers to test, especially for those negative cases that we didn't cover in previous manual test or in our end-to-end test. So I think I'd like to cover 5 areas in this negative test program, which includes registry verifier, which focuses on location, and certificate store, and also policy and high availability. I created a table to summarize some common negative test cases. So I think we can also contribute to any cases that are not involved in this table. This is open for everyone to edit. I thought I need to post this doc in the GitHub discussions, but I find that we don't actively use GitHub discussions to discuss any proposals. So I just use hack markdown to summarize the negative test cases. But whatever the tool I use, I think is ready for everyone to edit and add further test cases, negative test cases in this table, so we can assign people to have a test for different areas.
Sure. Yeah, let me know how you want to run this. There's few options. We can review this table together in, let's say, the Monday code review meeting, and come up with like new test cases, or we can also just asynchronously review this and self-assign. Which one do you prefer?
I would prefer that we asynchronize to review this table, the summarized test cases, and see if it is enough for us to start the test. If we think it's ready to go, then we can see the assignment. I think we can have at least 5 people to assign for each area that we want to test and cover it in the overall test cases.
Cool. Okay, so the step 1, we should all review this, and then we can work on who's gonna test out which area next week.
Yeah, I think the first step is to have an agreement that we have included the enough test cases, the negative test cases And the next step would be we have an assignment for different people to drive different area and start the test cases.
Yep, sounds good. Any other thoughts, anyone? Sounds good. Cool. So we'll work on reviewing this week, and then I'll add this item to the agenda next week so we can go through the comments.
Yeah. So as you know, Bing has refactored the logging framework and added a lot of new log handling in RC7. So I think it might be a good opportunity to test those active cases and see what those new logs looks like, and see if those logs meet our needs and can help users to troubleshooting better.
Yeah, we can also build our TSG based on the test results. Just like get the error output and just like put it in a list.
Yeah, we use this approach to append a lot of FAQ in our notary project documentation, aka TSG, maybe.
Yep. Thanks for the list. Let's see, what are the other items? So there's the readiness probe. That one is currently assigned to you, Akash.
Yeah, I
but
think
Luis,
we may need to.
Yeah, we need to rebalance, right?
Yeah, I'll be out until September 13th.
Yep. So I think if we want this for RC8, one of us would need to pick it up immediately, and also depends on the timeline for GA.
I think there needs to be some initial prodding here in terms of how much work it is, and like just understanding from the gatekeeper side if they do any retry. Can you follow up and then maybe have a conversation on this and decide then? Susan?
Yeah. So design first, like cost it first.
Yeah, I'd like to get a costing exercise here first.
Before we commit. Yeah, sounds good. So let me assign that to myself. Oh, how do I clear?
No, I think you just click on Akash again.
Yeah, I'll do some initial investigation and not see what's needed there.
Yep. Thank you, Susan.
And I can try to send you what I have, Susan. And if you have any questions, like I should be able to see my messages a few times a day.
Oh, so. No. Please enjoy your time off. I will, we'll review how much this will cost and then make a decision.
We'll be sending you high priority messages directly to you, Akash.
I'll be stealing some cafe's Wi-Fi and trying to.
all with exclamation points and needed ASAP.
Sounds good.
I remember there was a discussion about HA readiness for it to take off the experimental flag. Have we made a decision on that?
I think we've had the discussion several times. I think that we decided to ship V1 as experimental and then roll it out afterwards as we get more and more feedback. I think there's several aspects of the overall installation and like just the user experience that we need to flush out before we can call it out as a done feature.
Feynman, is that okay with you?
Sounds good. I think we can add enough negative test cases against the HA scenario, and I would need Akash to help me to add more common test cases for HA. I just added 2 test cases in this table against HA, but I believe there might be some other important test cases that I missed in this table. HA is a quite important feature for improving stability. I think we can cover that in the negative test cases.
Sure,
And also
I can take a look. Yep.
Yep. And just to on the GA timeline, just so we're gonna be OOF for end of September to the beginning of October, Luis, that Shuwei just posted the dates.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it's also the school holidays in Australia as well. So September is a busy season. So we have to take into these vacations into consideration when we decide the GA date.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Migrate to latest Azure Container Registry SDK. I remember we said we'll move this out to post GA. Luis, do we have a milestone for that?
We don't have a milestone. We probably need to add one.
Okay, should I put it in future for now?
Yeah, let's put it in future. But I will create one this weekend and move some of the things that we know we're gonna have to do right away.
Yep. I can just leave a comment. Move to 1.1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're waiting for the content writer to help us with the migration, but that one is doc related only. I'm working on the automated test for quick starts. That's almost ready. There's just a few issues to resolve. Pluggable design for certificate store. This one will be moved out to 1.1 as well, to the earliest.
Yep.
Then what else do we have? Add documentation for local setup. Again, doc related. Multiple signature verification, bin, that one is also documentation related from memory.
Is it a template one?
Right.
Oh, so it's chart related. Is it? Is it doc related or chart related?
It's more like doc related.
Oh, okay, documentation. Okay.
Is this just the update to the library constraint template?
Yeah, I think.
It's more about the regular templates.
Okay.
So
Yep.
that we should have some templates for users. And we already have some like very basic templates, but we need to provide more templates to support more use cases.
Yeah, maybe we should change the title of that because it does seem very misleading. So maybe have samples or like documented samples for.
Or maybe we can close this issue and just have another doc issue, because this issue is more
yes.
about the feature.
Right. I think we so that makes sense then. So yeah, let's close this one. Remove the samples.
Yeah.
And then yeah, Bingbing, can you add an issue to track the sample?
Yeah, I'll create it.
Okay, thank you. And the last item, again, just reviewing some of our docs that have specific references to Ratify version. Cool, that's everything in our list. Sounds good, everyone? Any other topics? No? Oh, happy. All right, we're on time. Thanks for joining, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.